Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves is the D&D movie that D&D fans have been waiting for, because it's actually good. It's got adventure, it's got iconic magic and monsters and fantastic locations, and a few very subtle Easter eggs from the game itself. It's got pretty solid characters, it has at least a couple hilarious jokes and exciting action sequences, and it has enough heart to make it relatable despite being in a fictional world. But even as a D&D fan, I still have to give this movie a chaotic good rating, because as I just listed, it crams a lot of adventure and characters and references into this one movie, and I think that may hurt its reception from the non-D&D fan audience. So I'm going to break down this movie, because I want it to be successful, because that will get more people curious about D&D, which gets more people curious about all role-playing games. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing RPGs together, and if you're already interested in D&D or another game, but can't seem to find people to play with, I highly recommend our sponsor, Start Playing. It's the top website for connecting interested players with experienced game masters for a variety of games. You can easily browse through games, filtering by system and type to find and reserve your spot in a game that suits your preferences and your schedule. That's like the hardest part of playing RPGs. But before you reserve a spot, you can also review the game details, such as the Game Master's experience and ratings, and know that all Game Masters are reviewed by Start Playing for quality and safety. So, whether you're new to RPGs or a seasoned player, or even a talented Game Master who wants to go pro, check out startplaying.games through the link below, and start playing games. I am going to walk you through the plot, but not give away any important moments that should be first seen on screen. So here we go. Opening scene in the frozen tundra of Icewind Dale at the Revel's End prison, which, by the way, was only written into the 5e Frostmaiden book because they needed a prison somewhere on the Sword Coast for this movie. Pretty cool. This scene follows a very intimidating, almost Lord of the Rings style orcish prisoner, as in fully made up, no CGI, being brought in and led to his cell with who other than our main characters, Edgin and Holga, played by Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez. We get a good taste of Edgin's charming wit while he sloppily knits some mittens, followed by a taste of Holga's violent tendencies, fully warranted though. Then, through a scene where Edgin appeals for early release from the prison, he professes what he literally calls his backstory to this board of nobles, frequently pausing, however, hoping the board would wait for the last noble to arrive, and you'll find out why. It's very funny. And this whole opening sequence really sets the stage for how well the movie balances grit and wit, while also explaining the main character's motivation to resurrect his wife because he feels a heavy guilt over how she died. No spoiler though. And his other motivation to reunite with his daughter, from whom he was torn away when he was captured and imprisoned. So already, based on the banter and the serious conflict, you see why so many people have likened this movie to the first Guardians of the Galaxy. And it becomes even more like that after they get out of prison, where they realize Edgin's daughter has left their home and is with one of their old party members, Forge, the con artist, who is played amazingly well by Hugh Grant. Yes, that Hugh Grant, alongside a mysterious wizard, Sophina. It turns out that while Edgin and Holga were imprisoned, these two villains have not only risen to rule the city of Neverwinter, but also convinced Edgin's daughter that he abandoned her to seek money rather than a way to resurrect her mom. Then Forge tries to have Edgin and Holga killed, but they escape in the first fascinating fight sequence where Holga is using everything from bricks to axes to her bare hands to take down a bunch of guards, which is shown in the trailer, by the way. And it's also funny because Edgin spends this entire fight just trying to break out of his bonds, but they get away and decide to assemble a team, or adventuring party, if you will, so they can break into Forge's vault, steal back the item they need to resurrect Edgin's wife, rescue his daughter, and maybe get some gold along the way. And so they recruit some magic users, Simon, the extremely pessimistic but lovable and geeky sorcerer, and Doric, the quiet and cool-headed druid. But here's one of my hang-ups. The filmmakers probably could have just used one of these characters. Simon the Sorcerer does have important character development over the course of the movie, but Doric barely even has any meaningful interactions with the other characters of the party. Don't get me wrong, some of the most fantastic scenes in the whole film and the trailer, are when Doric uses her wild shape to transform into a myriad of creatures while fighting and infiltrating and fleeing from a few locations. I just think, because she doesn't have any development and only uses wild shape, not even casting any spells, they could have combined that with Simon the Sorcerer, whose whole character arc is about how he's a sorcerer who's really bad at spellcasting, but becomes great at it by the end of the movie. Not to mention, Simon actually has a history with Edgin, Holga, and Forge, but Doric is just like an acquaintance of Simon, who he himself is already sort of a secondary main character, if that makes sense. But thanks to the druid's reconnaissance, the party learns that to break into the vault, they need a magic item called the Helm of Disruption, also shown in the trailer. Holga knows the helm was in a famous battle involving her tribe, and on the party's way to the old battleground, Holga visits an old lover, and we get probably the funniest character interaction in the entire movie. Grace and I were seriously laughing out loud in the theater, as were many others, during this, let's just say, surprising cameo appearance by another notable actor. And as funny as it was, the scene was also very heartfelt, and Holga comes away with an important item, other than the helm, that the party needs later. And this is another excellent point about this movie. Almost everything had a purpose. Every character, location, item, and monster delivered a joke, or excitement, or furthered the plot in at least some small way. Well done. Then we get a pretty long sequence of the party using the Speak with Dead spell, a snippet of which was shown in the trailer, to tease out the current location of the Helm of Disruption, and the party learns that during the battle it was given to a famous and heroic paladin called Zenk. And this guy was hilarious, just over-the-top, lawful good, even falling into the I don't understand sarcasm trope, but completely pulling it off. And as a tertiary character, it's okay for him to be very one-dimensional. Basically, he really nailed the role as powerful NPC. The paladin tells the party that the Helm of Disruption is locked up safe and sound in the Underdark, also shown in the trailer, so they all go down to get it. There's a short but funny scene with some intellect devourers, a great scene with a trapped bridge that really feels like something that could happen during a D&D session, and then they get the helm. There's an awesome fight scene with some assassins, and a hilarious chase scene away from the famously chonky red dragon Themberchild with an explosive ending to this chase. And yeah, all of that had snippets in the trailer. Not spoiling anything. And this chase scene probably had the most people laughing in the theater, though it did expose how some of the CGI is a little cartoonish, but it wasn't bad CGI like an early 2000s movie. It's fine. Now, to avoid actual spoilers, I can only summarize the rest to say Simon has trouble attuning to the Helm of Disruption, so the heist does not go as planned, which you probably could have guessed. Then the party is thrust into a wild and deadly competition, which is actually shown in the trailer. But of course, they survive that, only to realize the full depths of the villainy happening in this story, and because they are heroes, they risk everything to stop it. So does every character and spell fit easily into the game rules of D&D? Not even close, but I think this movie does a great job showcasing what the game has to offer, even including several of the most iconic D&D monsters. Every humanoid, like the birdfolk and catfolk and snakefolk, were all animatronic rather than CGI, which also lends the movie a nostalgic feel for classic fantasy filmmaking, and there were a few classic D&D Easter eggs, like, of course, the 80s cartoon characters appearing in the competition at the end, but even the font used for subtitles was, I'm like 90% sure, the same font of the AD&D books from first edition. But do let me know in the comments what other Easter eggs you noticed in this movie, and if it's a spoiler, just include that at the start of your comment. Still, I think my main problem with this movie is that I feel the title alone could turn away people who are not yet interested in the game of D&D. I know I would be hesitant to check it out if I thought the movie was going to be full of references I wouldn't understand. As I tried to emphasize here, I think this movie is enjoyable for just about anybody, but you get even more out of it if you know the lore and the game rules sprinkled throughout the film. I just hope non-D&D fans still take a chance on it because it is a good movie, and I could easily see it branching into some kind of franchise if it makes enough money, and all of that will help grow D&D, through which all those new folks can discover other tabletop role-playing games. So if you agree, please give this video a thumbs up, maybe share it with your gaming group, and check out this video about how to be a great player. Then consider subscribing, because that sort of thing does in fact help the channel. But thanks for all your support, and keep building.